Good evening, everybody. Tonight, the City of Fort Collins will be conducting an administrative hearing virtually for the purpose of considering Fischer Properties PDP number 220007. I'm going to go ahead and open up that hearing at 5:30. Do you mind sharing that screen, Harp? So I'm wondering if you want to just share it so that it doesn't show everything that's coming up. Like, there we go. So for folks who are either calling in or on the Zoom call, we wanted to put up the names of the individuals at the city that are on the call with us. If you are having technical difficulty seeing or hearing what's being discussed, please reach out to M. Mylar. You could reach her two ways. You can call 970-224-6076, and you can also contact her via email. She's listening for her phone and checking her emails. The email address is DEVREVIEW comments. So DEV review comments at fcgov.com. So if anybody's having any difficulties hearing or seeing or any other technical difficulties, please reach out to M. Katie Claypool is also available, and her email address is kclaypool, CLAYPOOL @fcgov.com. So again, my name is Lori Strand, and I'm the hearing officer presiding over this hearing tonight. City staff and I are all participating remotely, and I'm not sure if you have the slide for Ordinance 79, but pursuant to Ordinance 079 of 2020, I've determined in consultation with appropriate city staff that it is desirable to conduct this hearing by remote technology to provide reasonably available participation by parties in interest and by the public, consistent with the requirements of the ordinance, because meeting in person would not be prudent for some or all persons. Tonight, all public participation will be done through Zoom, online, or by phone. The hearing is being recorded in full. We'll go over this again, what's on the screen right now, when we get to the public comment period. But quickly, when we get to that point in time, we will ask you to state your name and last name. There is an icon on your screen where you can raise your hand to let us know that you'd like to comment. If you're calling in, you can press *9 on your phone, and that will let us know that you would like to speak. And again, we'll go over this again when we get to that point in the hearing process. So as we do when we are in person, which has been a while, we read in the rules of conduct for administrative hearings. So I will read those in and then go over the order of proceedings. So the rules of conduct, this is a legal hearing, and I will moderate it for civility and fairness to ensure that everyone who wishes to speak can be heard. All persons present tonight have an obligation to follow my instructions. Expectations of attendees, members of the audience, members online must be recognized by me before they can speak. Public comment is limited to the public testimony portion of the hearing, as listed in the order of proceedings, which we'll go over in a moment. Speakers must confine their remarks to the merits of the proposal under consideration. Speakers must address the remarks to me and maintain a courteous tone and avoid injecting personal tone into the debate. Personal attacks will not be tolerated, nor questioning the motives of another speaker. It's the proposal, not a speaker, that is the topic of interest. So if we can go ahead to the order of proceedings. So this is going to be how we go through this application. When I'm done speaking in a moment, Mr. Mapes for the city is going to provide a brief overview of the project. Then the applicant will be given an opportunity to make a presentation. Mr. Mapes will then provide his presentation of the application and respond to anything the applicant may have brought up. Then we're going to move on to the public testimony portion of the hearing, and I'll go over the raising of the hand and the *9 and 5 when we get there. The applicant and staff will both be given an opportunity to respond to comments made by the public. I may ask questions at any point in the process, or I may hold them till the end. But I'm required by code to issue a decision within 10 business days of the close of this hearing tonight. If you would like a copy of that decision, be sure to, again, state your name and address during the public testimony portion when the time comes. And you could also email, is that Katie or Em that they should email if they would like a copy of the decision?
It's Katie, they should email.
So if you'd like a copy of the decision, you could also email Katie Claypool. And again, her address is kclaypool@fcgov.com. So if you want a copy but you don't feel like speaking, that's another way you can get it. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Mr. Mapes for the project overview.
I assume you can hear me?
Yes.
How about now? Yeah? Okay. This will be very brief. And then we'll let the applicants present their project. And then if there's anything to fill in, I can come in later. I'm sure the applicants will completely cover the location that we're talking about tonight. Right across from CSU on the west, across Shield Street at Westward Drive, and then extending west over to Delmar Street. The zoning, the property is here with the asterisk. The plan includes two parts. And I'll just say right now that in staff's discussion tonight, and I would think in the applicant's discussion tonight as well, there will be a lot more discussion about the front part than the rear part, I would expect. This is neighborhood conservation buffer zoning district, and it permits the apartment building component of the plan. Again, there's two components. One is an apartment building here along Shields and westward up in the so-called sort of front of the project. And then back access from Delmar Street is a single family detached house subdivision as a second part, linked by a walkway and part of the same plan, but different zoning. The NCB zone is here, runs up and down along Shields, and the RL zone encompasses a large swath over to the west. It doesn't really matter for tonight's hearing, but just for the record and for full context, the applicants will probably mention this themselves also, but part of this property that's involved in this plan has already been through some hearings for rezoning it in 2020. The two westernmost house lots, which have now been assembled into the apartment building property, were recently approved by Planning, Zoning Commission and City Council to be rezoned to the NCB zone so that it now kind of runs just in a line, whereas before there had been this notch in the NCB zoning. And I'm just going to stop right there, see what the applicants, how much they've got to present, and we can come back to me if it's helpful and necessary.
Great, thank you. When the applicants present, if you could each, whoever speaks, state your name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Sam Coots with Ripley Design, landscape architect and land planner representing the applicant Eric Fischer for tonight's hearing. We've also got Eric Fischer, the applicant developer, as well as VFLA, the architect for the project. Okay, I think Clark hit this pretty well, but just to give a little more context on what's existing here today, the western about 2 acres of this site is open horse pasture, which is in the middle of this RL zoned subdivision at the moment. And then the eastern half is about 3.5 acres. There's 5 single-family homes existing there with some accessory structures and several mature trees. As Clark said, that this property was rezoned back in 2020. A little more context behind why that occurred. Eric Fischer, the applicant, actually grew up here on Westward Drive. This is the family house, and he and his family have been part of this community for decades. It's been his dream and his vision to leave something for his kids in the form of a development property. And so this is a bit of a legacy project for him. So the first step in realizing that vision was to rezone the properties. It seemed the NCB district needed to be complete there to allow some multifamily use on that front half of the property. So with that rezoning application, when it was approved, there was one condition of approval, and that was any development that occurred here in this NCB zone district on these parcels needed to include 1 parking space per bedroom. So we have that to start with as a condition of approval of the rezone. Well, we started design on the property back in 2016, and we've been through many concepts and iterations, and we've examined this property in all sorts of manners. And through that, we've had a lot of outreach with the neighborhood and tried to see what was important for them, what's going to work for the site. So you can see the different number of combinations of there were some properties included at some points and not others, partners, different assemblies. We talked about the possibility of bringing a new street network through here to connect Del Mar and Westward. That wasn't viewed very favorably from the neighborhood. I think the concern was multifamily traffic cutting through out into Del Mar. So we moved away from that idea. We looked at duplexes and single family attached along Westward here on the bottom right. That there were some technical difficulties there with just fire access. We contemplated land swaps. We looked at podium parking. We looked at surface parking. And through the years, we've really started to dial this thing in something that both works for Eric and development, but also corresponds to the neighborhood. And this is his community he grew up in, and he wants to make sure that it's the right fit for the area. So tonight we present this site plan for PDP. As Clark said, it kind of breaks into 2 parts, but it is one contiguous project, and the western portion of that are 9 single-family detached lots. They're accessed off of Del Mar Street on public right-of-way that terminates in a cul-de-sac. And then lot 10 is everything else from those single-family lots headed east. And lot 10 contains 1 multifamily building. That 1 multifamily building has 77 dwelling units for a density of 22.78 DUs per acre and 122 bedrooms. Again, because of that condition of approval at the rezone, those 122 bedrooms, that's what parking is based off of. The multifamily is designed to be market rate for rent dwellings. The stormwater design through the area has had quite a big impact on how this site lays out. And so we want to point out there's detention here in the middle between the 2 lots that serve each project, and then some more detention along Shield Street on the eastern side. We'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. There were no defined natural areas, so there are no required natural habitat buffers for the project. And lastly, something we're really proud of, especially with infill redevelopment here in Fort Collins, is there are no modifications or alternative compliance attached to this application. For access and circulation, starting with vehicular, the multifamily lot 10, you can see in purple, is accessed with a single access on westward on the northern boundary. Completes a loop internal with the parking lot. There's emergency access on the southeast corner of this lot that extends out to Shield Street. So that's where we get the second point of access for the multifamily development. Again, the single family lots are just accessed through the cul-de-sac there off Del Mar. But pedestrian connectivity has been really important. And how do we connect these two ideas? You see in the green dots, the public infrastructure for pedestrian connectivity with detached sidewalks, and then the orange route represents the internal pedestrian sidewalk. Starting on Shields, there are 3 different entrances into the site, which lead to the multifamily building. Residences can then either choose to go through the lobby and out through a courtyard, or pass through. Traffic can be on the southern edge of the building, go around. There's a designated route on the north side of this parking lot between the building that's a more urban landscape feel with tree grates and street trees through here that connect through landscape islands to the property to the east, or sorry, to the west. The multifamily portion does sit in the TOD overlay district, which would allow for a reduction in parking. Again, however, we have that condition of approval to deal with from the rezone. So there are 122 parking spaces for the 122 beds being proposed. And then single family is all self-contained parking on their lots. The NCB district is designed as a buffer and a transitional zone district. And it's in the perfect spot here along Shields, where we have single family to the RL to the west, and then across Shields, you see some higher density mixed use zone districts. So it seemed appropriate to respond to that from a building height standpoint and place our taller portions of the building, the 3-story portion seen here in blue, as far east as we can along Shield Street. And then any parts of this building that get adjacent to existing single family step down to 2 stories. That's the green. Furthermore, we wanted to use heights and setbacks to start breaking down some of the mass and scale of this building. So the orange you see here is 1 story. And again, this relates back to some of these characteristics you see in single family detached subdivisions. From an amenity standpoint, there's a requirement for 5,000 square feet of a public gathering space. We have 2 courtyards here shown in red, the combined total of 7,800 square feet, which satisfy that requirement on their own. There's additional rooftop terrace lounge space on the building in blue, and there's an entry plaza along Shield Street. Tree preservation has been a very closely monitored topic on this project. Part of the 60-foot setback that we'll discuss a bit along Shields was geared specifically towards creating this lush landscape and along Shield Street. There's some really great trees that exist there today. So we've been working diligently with city staff to save as many of these as we can and integrate them into our stormwater design. So you'll see in green and orange here that the 5 trees we plan on preserving on site. The RL district has some dimensional standards that apply to single family lots. Our plan complies or exceeds with all of those standards, including setbacks, widths, and minimum lot areas. You can see on the right, our smallest lot with 6,085 square feet, and our largest lot, a little over 7,300 square feet. The NCB district also has some dimensional standards associated with it. Most notably is that 60-foot wide buffer along Shields. This is a setback, not a buffer. And this is another aspect that we're really proud of on this plan, and something that you don't see easily met here in infill development in Fort Collins without a modification. So we're well out of that 60-foot and preserving the trees as intent of that setback. The side yard setbacks in NCB districts are set at a minimum of 15 feet, but then increase from there based on a ratio of the building height. So on our southern boundary, we have a side yard setback here that with that ratio is required minimum is 26 feet 6 inches. And we are well outside of that at 45 feet 10 inches. NCB district also has a standard relating to the allowable floor area in the rear half of a lot. So the rear half of a lot can only have 25% max floor area. Since we're on a corner lot here with Westward and Shields, we examined this from both Westward and Shields. This exhibit shows Westward being the front of the lot and the blue area being the rear 50%. Everything in red is that floor area that's within that. We're below the maximum of the 25, we're sitting at 22%. In this scenario, from Shields, the same study, the rear 50% is shown in green of lot 10 here, and the red area is 23% of that, again, under the standard. From an architectural design standpoint, there's a lot of variety in the area, and as true to the nature of the zone district, it is a transition. And so across Shields, you can see 5-story multifamily buildings on the bottom right. This is down Lake Street, just east of Shields. And then within the RL district, you see single-story ranches on the bottom left, 2-story single-family detached, and then up and down Shields in that same zone district, you see 2, 3-story multifamily developments. So a lot to choose from a compatibility standpoint, but there's some commonalities here. You see a lot of gables in the roof design. You see some lap siding, some stone, and we really tried to pick up on those design cues. So architecturally here, the top perspective, you're standing on the northeast corner along Westward and Shields, and looking into the project, this is a 3-story portion of the project. And you'll see those roof forms, the gables. You'll see defined entries along the ground floor units. You have the strong base of the stone material that you see in some of the other multifamily developments throughout the area. And then as we get higher, you introduce more of the residential materials of lap siding, stucco, board and batten. On the bottom of this page is the perspective standing on Westward Drive. And this is a great shot to show what that height transition looks like as we move closer to single family homes. And that entry, that the lobby leasing area there, a single story and further setback really helps to articulate and break down the mass. Again, the proportions are that of a single family home that you see in the existing neighborhood. These are some elevations here on the south elevation. This was an intentional design to bring the ends of the building south rather than creating a large bar of units and creating one long facade along the existing single family. We've brought 3 bars of side elevations down, which minimize that impact to the neighbors to the south. The eastern elevation is what you see as you move along Shields. So again, you can see that height transition to the left of the 2-story and then up to 3, and then it drops down to a single story. And that single story, again, it's all about creating a defined entry. There's unique aspects to each entry. So the main lobby has a shed roof over it, while the individual units along the ground floor have those gable roof entries. And then the west elevation, you can see what that 2-story building wing looks like with the rooftop terrace there. That does it for our presentation. We have a lot more info and graphics. If you have any questions, Eric is here, as well as our architect with VFLA. Let us know if you have any.
I just have one question for now, and
Yeah.
then I'll say the others for later. But looking at lot 5, what is lot 5? Lot 6 has the detention area, some nice landscaping, but is lot 5 looking directly at the parking lot, or is there some relief there?
That's a good question. So the front a lot is carried off of here. There is screening on the back of this parking lot. And so we're imagining upright junipers here. And this continues all the way along the southern border. And as well, we've got some along here. So all boundaries are proposed to have some upright, narrow shrubs and trees to aid in that screening.
And then, and I'll probably have more questions on this after, but on the tree mitigation along fields, I know there's a lot of beautiful established trees there, and I was looking at the code provision on tree mitigation, and it talks about relocating trees if you can. And I saw in the staff report that tree mitigation is being provided with the addition of a cash and lieu payment. How, and this might be more of a question for Clark as well, but how much is actually being mitigated on site versus being paid in cash and lieu?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me get the exact number for you real quick here.
The majority are mitigated on site, but yeah, the numbers will be on the plan sheet. And if Sam can easily find that, that's great.
And are any of the trees being relocated? Is that a possibility?
So let's see here. I think we've got 87 out of the 90 trees will be mitigated on site. And then the remaining 3 through cash and lieu. I'm sorry, those aren't total trees. Those are the caliper inches that's calculated.
Right. I thought there were 44 trees.
Yeah.
44
yes,
trees on the site. But yeah, the majority of the mitigation is on site. A little bit of cash in lieu. 1 tree to be relocated along Shields.
Thank you. So I'm going to save my questions till after Clark does his presentation. So, nice.
Okay, if Sam has stopped sharing, then I can go back to sharing. I think it's obvious. I don't know if we've directly mentioned it, but the apartment building portion here on the eastern part of the property assembles a number of existing properties, 5 existing properties with 5 existing houses. Obviously, those are to be demoed. And it shows you the older pattern that's described in the staff report. Some large lots were here across from CSU, built before World War II, when CSU was still the College of Agriculture, sometimes called gentleman farms or hobby farms. So that's the history there. The historical significance of these has been evaluated, and there is not a finding of eligibility as landmarks, which would invoke the historic resource protection standards in the land use code. But
Good question on that. I saw in the staff report that those determinations of non-eligibility are good for 5 years, and it sounds like this one recently expired. But so is it still effective because the application was pending? I saw a note in the staff report and just wanted clarification.
I guess I can't say exactly why. I took it either it's that, or because it was so close, and because there's been nothing changed that would require a reevaluation after the initial 2017 evaluation. And the applicants did mention that they've been at this exploring possibilities for a number of years, and that's probably when that first evaluation was done. I got that from our historic preservation staff, and I didn't ask them why the 5-year expiration, doesn't invalidate those findings. Oh,
yeah,
maybe
you're
Sam?
right. Yeah, I remember all of that back when we were running through it. So we went through that process with historic preservation. Everything got the go ahead, everything checked out. When we submitted for the PDP, we were still within that 5-year window.
There
And
you
so
go.
they were active still for this application.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that, yeah. The two parts, that's been covered now thoroughly. NCB zoning covered thoroughly. Oh, the rear yard floor area. Sam mentioned that it's a 25% floor area limit in the rear half of the lot. It's actually 33. So there's even less of an issue, or more sort of cushion, if you will, in the floor area in the rear yard, regardless of how you measure the rear yard. I saw the numbers like 23% or so being under 25. It's actually the standard for that is 33%. And then Sam covered the unique 60-foot setback for this stretch of Shields. Has a history to that. Sam covered it well, and yeah, the plan currently provides that. Just a little bit of background on the NCB zone. Doesn't really matter for this, but regarding the 33% rear yard limit on floor area, that dates back to the original designation of the NCB zone, the creation of the zone district, which came with planning and land use code standards for these older downtown neighborhoods, the pre-war, grid street pattern with narrow lots, alleys, houses on those narrow lots, front yards and backyards. That's where the standard originated, is limiting the impact that someone building in their backyard would have on their neighbors. Later, the NCB zone, in another special planning process, was assigned to this stretch down here that we're dealing with here now today. And so it added the 60-foot requirement into the NCB zone, did not change the 33% requirement, but in this case, the whole finding of a rear yard was a little bit of a question, given that it's at the corner, so you can have two rear yards, and it's not really the pattern of yards that the standard was originally written, as part of the vision for why the standard was done in the first place. Fortunately, here there's no issue. No matter how you measure it, it comes in at less than 33%. But that's just something that took a little bit of figuring out for how to even treat it and approach it. Sam mentioned the 60-foot setback, and the trees was a significant issue from the start. And okay, regarding the 50-foot setback, no, the 50% of the rear lot area, Sam presented a better diagram than this. This was an early iteration that I did, just trying to get a handle on what we might even be talking about with the defining the 50%. So no matter how you measure it, I measured it here one way, Sam measured it a different way. There's no issue. And in fact, the existing house here that's being removed was much closer to the adjacent neighbor here than the proposed plan. So just a little more, I guess, call it background on that whole question about the rear yard 50%. Oh, building design iterations, they covered the architecture, but there was staff felt a pretty significant change from the initial iteration here facing east along Shields to a revision, responding to comments from staff to be a little more neighborhood scale, more modulation of the mass. There's this break right here, and then step down to 2 stories on the south. This is the south end of the building facing Shields. So pretty significant response and adaptation there. A change from kind of just rear patio doors to more of a entrance to the dwelling units, homes facing streets, homes facing sidewalks that lead right out to the street sidewalks was, is what characterizes the neighborhood, makes this a neighborhood. And So anyway, those were fairly significant changes that really helped the building to meet the standards.
I'm sorry for interrupting, but it seems timely. So I was looking at the 4.9 design standards, and you or Sam have gone through a number of them, but one of them that I saw is a design standard that says the north facade of 3-story building shall have a 1-to-1 step back at the 3rd floor, or a 1-to-1 roof pitch to reduce shading on north abutting lots. I don't see a step back, and I'm just wondering what staff's determination was. I know there was a shade study that was done.
I am going to have to look at that standard.
That's fine, we'll have time, yeah. So it's
I'm thinking-
17.9 in that table.
Thanks. I was thinking that that pertains to the north side of a building where there is another lower building on the north side of it, so that it would be shaded.
Yeah, because it says on north abutting lots, and so I'm wondering if there was a determination of non-applicability.
Oh, you know, the intention there is for somebody, a developer in this zone coming in and putting in a taller building, you know, this, or anything over, what is it, 18 feet or whatever it says.
20, it says 28, it says north facade
28,
of the 1-to-1 step back at the 3rd floor, 28 feet, or a 1-to-1 roof pitch.
okay, so
Hey,
actually,
Clark, if I may,
yeah,
I think through our review, the language in that chart that you're referring to, north facade, 1-to-1 step back, to reduce shading on a north abutting lots. Since we have right of way directly adjacent, there are no abutting lots. That's where we were steered that was not applicable in this scenario.
That's what I don't know if there's a definition for abutting in the code, but that's what I was assuming was the case. Then again, I know I saw the shade study, but.
north abutting lots, okay. Gosh, yeah, that is sure intended to be, again, have more to do with those neighborhoods that I just showed you, the actual Old Town neighborhoods with narrow lots. And narrow lots all lined up in a row along the street, and having redevelopment come in and then shade a neighbor on the north. So yeah, that, Sam, that's correct. There is no abutting lot on the north. And abutting means touching. Actually, it is defined.
Great, okay, that's helpful, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
There was any, yeah, and, you know, just a little bit on staff's findings about the building. We see the pitched roofs with eaves. We see the siding, there's lap siding and the other siding materials, windows and doorways. I have a question for the applicants I'd like to ask at this hearing. I think I had emailed you with this question, didn't hear back, but the stone that's shown here, I assume that this is a pattern that your computer has available and doesn't necessarily show the type of stone or cultured stone that you would use, but I wanted to ask if this is just holding the place for the stone, or if there is a stone product that actually looks like this, which has more of a concrete block look to it. Just a question.
Yeah, this is Jeff Fleischer. I'm a principal and architect at VFLA. So the idea behind the stone is, one, quality of material. It is a natural limestone to give it a nice coloration and modeling. The pattern is based off a lot of the neighborhood brick patterns, which is a running bond. So we tried to emulate that throughout the project to again, create some compatibility to the project.
So it's real stone.
Yeah, it's a thin set limestone.
Wow.
Yes,
Okay.
but it's real.
And does this represent the pattern for that?
Yeah, that's a running bond, correct. So it matches in the idea of the other homes in the neighborhood that have a running bond brick pattern.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Always wondered about that. I wondered about the module size, but if that's real stone, I don't see a big issue or problem. It just more thinking about the scale of the modules, but overall, you know, staff just never did see any issue with the features of the building, the modulation, the articulation, fenestration, all of those things. Oh, Sam kind of ran through the iterations. This was an initial concept plan, actually had a 20-foot setback. And in response to comments, ended up going to the 60-foot setback. This was the first iteration. That was an initial concept before any plans were submitted. This is a first iteration submitted, had the setback, but there was only one main entrance to the building here, and really no main entrances to the building on the east side, and consistent with more of a neighborhood pattern of home streets facing streets rather than a large apartment building with just one entrance. A revised plan created these entryways with walkways leading out to the sidewalks as much as possible across the detention pond here. But even here, you can step out onto this secondary walkway and get to the walkway that goes right to the sidewalk going north, which would be mostly towards CSU, or going south, and here going south. So that was all worked out in the iterations. It works pretty well. And as far as these sidewalks go, currently there are narrow attached sidewalks attached right to the curb. This updates the sidewalks to comply with today's street standards for that, detaching them from the curb and lining them with street trees. So that's another pretty significant change from the way that it is now. And the plan does create a significantly better streetscape for walking in that regard.
Quick question for you, because it back to the prior slide. So on the one more forward. Yeah. The next
What's
one. The next slide.
This is the current hearing plan. This one?
Yep, that one. So on the kind of the sidewalks that are right in front of the buildings on the east side, how come on that southeast portion do they not connect?
Right, because of this big spruce tree right here.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, it's a competing objective. The developer team is being told to, you know, create connected sidewalks, also being told to preserve the trees as much as possible, also being told to comply with our today's contemporary drainage and stormwater detention regulations, and there you go. So that's why that isn't there. I asked about that, and yeah, if it's physically possible to walk under this tree, maybe someday people will just walk through the needles. And
I bet that will be the case, and I think that's
but there's as much direct sidewalk access as was feasible in this case. But yeah, we gave quite a bit of attention even to that. That's a good point. Again, there wasn't much to say or do about the subdivision. The RL subdivision, the RL zone is predominantly for straightforward subdivision of land into lots. Main requirement is just the 6,000 square feet and then some basic setbacks, which actually get enforced. They're shown on the plan, but they'll be verified at building permit stage later. And that's it for staff. We'll stop sharing. You see the recommendation in the staff report. It's as simple as this.
I do have more questions, but I'm going to go ahead. I see there's a number of attendees, so I am going to go ahead and open up the public testimony portion of the hearing. And so the time is 6:14 p.m. And just a reminder to folks, I'm going to read our script about how to do this. So now is the part of the hearing set aside for public comment. If you are participating using the computer or the Zoom app, please use the raise hand button on your screen to let us know if you have a question or would like to speak. If you are calling in from a phone, you will need to press the *9 to raise your hand. Keep your hand raised and we will call on you when it's your turn to speak. please state and spell your name if it's tricky, and provide your address when you speak. Just so folks understand, we're going to go through all the public comments, and then we'll provide an opportunity for staff and the applicant to respond to questions that are raised or comments that are raised. So we're just going to go through them all at first. So I see one hand raised by Mr. Burtis.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
We can, thank you.
So I want to say awesome job. I'm James Burtis. I live at 1205 Springfield Drive, so I'm just one block over. This looks like I'm really excited for this development. I think this is a great place for multifamily housing. I just had one quick question because I'm a kind of a transportation nut. Specifically, I wanted to ask about bike parking. You have a really good location for biking, given that you're right off Pitkin. You have access to pretty much the whole city. I'm wondering if you have any incorporation of indoor bike parking or protected bike parking in the plan. I just didn't see that mentioned. Thank you again.
So I'll let the applicant respond to that, or Mr. Mapes in a moment. So I don't see other hands, but I see a number of folks, number of attendees listening in. So I will give it a couple more seconds. If anybody wants to click the raise hand button, please do. Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment portion of the hearing. The time is now 6:16 p.m. And sure, I'll let, I know that I saw some bike parking, but I'll let Mr. Mapes or the applicant respond, whoever wants to.
Sam, why don't you?
Yeah, I can address that. We do. That's a great question. Thanks, James. Appreciate the attention to bike parking. It is a great spot for biking. So we have a total of 122 total bike spaces, and of that, we've got 77 of them considered enclosed. And I can see if I can share my screen. I can kind of show where those are.
I noted in the staff report that they're integrated with the architecture, which is just the ideal way that the city would love to see it happen. So go ahead, Sam.
Yes, they are. So there are some integrated into the building here, as well as a little bike barn. That's like an enclosed structure out here. And then we've got your standard fixed outdoor spaces kind of scattered through entrances across the site.
And point out there's a rack at the southeast corner with, it looks like 45. I mean, right down there.
Right down here.
And that's a large paved service area, south side of the building, sunny side. I thought that was probably a little further from some of the units, but convenient in other ways, given the paving and the sunny side of the building. All of them are on the sunny side of the building, yeah.
Okay, so I do have some questions. I'm just going to go through them in the order that I saw them in documents, so I might jump around a bit, but some of them I've already interrupted on. So on the prior rezoning, just a quick note, and I'll send a follow-up. If I can get it, I assume that condition is approved in the ordinance that approved the rezoning, but it'd be great if I could have it for the record so I can reference it, that condition is being met. So that's just a note. I've already asked about tree mitigation, so thank you for that. I'm glad that the majority are being mitigated on site. It is a beautiful property. So I already asked the question on the historic, that the applicant, it sounds like the application was pending, and so that's why the 5 years, and you spoke with historic preservation staff and they're comfortable with the application moving forward and that nothing's changed. But there was a comment in the staff report that said something about compatibility with 1301 South Shields properties encouraged. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that, what that comment is referring to. And I started going through the historic preservation section of the code before this meeting and we didn't get fully through it, but wondering what that comment refers to.
I put some slides here sort of at the end. Yeah. This is 1301 Springfield. And actually, this is 1301 Springfield, and we are talking about this property here to the north of 1301. First of all, 1301 is another one of those larger, older properties, and it's got quite a hedgerow planting here. Google Earth cannot even see into the backyard because this is a solid mass of vegetation. But really that comment in the staff report was regarding just the non-applicability of the historic preservation standards. And that was just a comment from our historic preservation staff saying that if the overall staff, the whole planning staff finds that the building is compatible under the general citywide compatibility standards, then that'll suffice for any even question about compatibility with 1301. 1301 has not been found to be an eligible landmark or anything like that yet, but it's just another building that's nearby that is more than 50 years old. So that was kind of just, again, doesn't really matter in this case, but I put this here. Oh, I put this here just to mention that staff found that the way that this steps down to 2 stories, is a 2-story building. I get pitched roofs, eaves, all of that, doorways, windows, but there just was no issue with compatibility with 1301. So I only included that because we had that comment from historic preservation staff. I could have left it out, but just to be complete and just in case, you know, for the record, if there was to be any question, that's what that was about.
And Lori, just to touch base, that is a longtime family that has lived there that we've had a relationship with forever. They've been very, very supportive of this project. We've talked with them about, you know, the vegetation between the various areas, and of course the step down that the staff and we worked out on the height, all fits in well with that. But it's Beverly Carlson. Actually, I grew up with their kids, and their daughter actually moved back, believe it or not, from Texas A&M, remodeled the old house and are living there because that was a place they wanted to live. So they've been very much in favor of this project. In fact, willing to grant us easements if we needed them and various things. So just, I don't know if that's an aside, but I just thought I'd give you a little of that history.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so let's keep going. All right, I already asked about the step back. Just a couple, some are just comments, some are questions, maybe just things for you to note. Clark, is I saw on the site plan, you know, sheet 1 has that normal language that says that the project's going to develop in one phase if no phasing plan is shown. I didn't see a phasing plan, but I imagine that statement's not correct, given that I think the timing of the development of the single family is yet to be determined. So I don't know if that note should be updated. I guess it's just a comment. I did have a question on note 12. It says that the common open space and right-of-way landscaping will be maintained by Property Owners Association. I know that a lot of the landscaping in the apartment area I don't imagine there's gonna be a POA, so wondering how, I imagine that note may need to be updated to just say that the owner, but that's a question.
And that's correct, Lori, it would be us. We plan on this build and hold. Obviously, things could change, but our plan is that this would be within our family and in the trust from the family. And so the ownership would be planning on maintaining all that.
And just, I guess, just a question, and I'm sure this is probably on the plat, but in terms of the detention area, who is going to own and maintain that? I know there's a lot of it.
I can
Well,
speak to the plat.
Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Yeah.
Those are on the private property. They're not going to be city. And so it's just going to be part of, yeah.
Yep.
Sam, is that what you were going to say?
That it is, that's part, those detention areas that are in between the single family and the multifamily, I think is what you're referring to. And those are on lot 10, which is the multifamily lot. So that'll be owned and maintained by the owners of lot 10.
And likewise, the detention in between the building and Shields.
Correct.
Typical for almost all detention ponds all around the city. There's a few city-owned regional facilities, but most like this are privately owned, maintained.
I do not have any other questions. I guess I'll just remark that, and I know that you made this comment, Sam, in your presentation, but I think I've been doing this for 2 years now with the city, and for an application of this size and challenges to not see a modification request or an alternative compliance request has not been my experience. And
We worked really hard.
It looks like you worked quite hard to work within the code and the vision of the city. So let me make sure I've gone through the order of proceedings. I guess I'll just say if first, Mr. Mitch, you want to say anything to conclude, and then I'll let the applicant or Mr. Fischer, if you'd like to say anything to conclude.
Yeah, one thing. So here you have the apartment project and the subdivision project. And Sam mentioned screening of the parking lot here, just to buffer it from the housing, even though it's all part of the same plan. And Sam didn't mention that there's a privacy fence. We discussed that. And so the upright evergreen concept will be done in conjunction with a fence. So you got surefire year-round screening, no matter how the landscaping does. And then the landscaping will just augment and soften that. That is all I was going to add.
Thank you.
But I thought that was pretty significant, pretty important. Shrubs are one thing. They do some screening, but a fence absolutely does the screening. So
the junipers outside of my window snapped in half last week, so with the snow. So it's good to have a alternative. Any final comments from the applicant team?
Not for me, Eric, or you?
No, thank you, Lori, for your time.
I will find the ordinance and send it to you.
Thank you. And if I could get, if you would also send me your PowerPoint and
Oh, yes.
PowerPoint, that would be great as well.
Sure.
I will have everything. So the time is now 6:28, just under an hour. I know there's a national championship football game for anybody who's looking to watch that. But so enjoy your evening and Happy New Year. And I appreciate your time. We'll get a decision turned around soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Everybody.
Thanks, everyone.